Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to another Turnstile Tours online virtual program. My name is Brian Hoffman. Thank you all for joining us today. I'm a tour guide and here with Turnstile. I've been leading these programs since last March, so it's been going for a while. We're super excited to say that we are back on the streets once again, leading tours, and we are about to relaunch our food cart tours, which was a tour that I led quite often, and so. In celebration and honor of that, we're excited to check in with some of our favorite food cart vendors in the financial district, which is one of the neighborhoods we've always led tours in. So we'll be talking about that. My colleague Andrew is live in the financial district, so we'll be going to him shortly in and around the Wall Street area. So thank you so much for joining us today. Hey,
Brian,
Andrew.
can we cut to me? Because one of
cut
our
to
carts is
Andrew.
about to leave.
Oh, great. And actually, we planned it for this. This cart is a breakfast cart, right? So they close right around lunchtime.
Yeah, so you can see right behind me, this is Eric's breakfast cart. So hi, everybody. So I'm going to be walking around the financial district today, and we're going to be visiting with a few different carts. But this is one that we've been working with for a long time. So Eric's food cart. And you get to see the kind of process here, what happens to carts. And I'll flip my camera around.
And this happens every morning. They
so we have sort of the changing of the guard. So you can see Joseph here is getting ready to hook up with his colleague Nora, and we're here on Wall Street. Sorry, right in front of 60 Wall Street. But yeah, so this is one of the breakfast carts. So Joseph and Nora will set up around 4:30 in the morning and start serving around 5:30 or 6. So they don't just serve coffee and donuts and muffins and stuff, but they actually do serve hot food. As you can see, they make omelets, breakfast sandwiches and stuff. So yeah, so they'll set up around 4:30 and be here serving until around 11:30, and then the cart has to go back to the commissary. So you'll often see this change taking place in neighborhoods like this. Oftentimes, what you'll see actually is there'll be some arrangement between a breakfast cart and a lunch cart, and so they'll kind of swap places. So the breakfast cart will help hold their spot, which we'll talk about a little bit later on about how the vendors get their spots. But yeah, so I was talking to Joseph and Nora a little bit earlier before. They're a little busy right now, otherwise we'd say hello. But they talked about how the first customers that they get around 5:36 is the construction workers coming into the neighborhood, and then around between 8 and 9 is when they'll get their office clients in these big office buildings here. But of course that's changed quite a bit over the last year plus, in that there are a lot fewer people coming into the office, and we'll talk about how that has impacted street vendors. So this is part of the process that we don't normally get to see on a tour, which is kind of cool. These carts historically would have been push carts, so you could push them from the commissary where they were stored to the location where you're going to vend. But these carts have become so big and sophisticated and have all this kitchen equipment on them, and they're just, most of them are just too heavy to push, so they have to hook them up to a truck to tow them away. Plus the fact that the commissaries are no longer walking distance anymore. So
you will see
a bit too far.
Though you still see a few of the carts. There's definitely some of the hot dog vendors that you will still see pushing or pulling their cart from commissaries in Manhattan at a certain time of day.
Yeah, for sure. Maybe we can take a look at the map.
Oh yeah, we've got that, Doug. I think it's a few slides up. I should also mention that before COVID, Eric, who we've got a photo of, who owns this cart, also ran a lunch truck that would set up here sort of at this time. And so he made a deal kind of with himself where his breakfast cart would leave and his lunch truck would come. But I believe that the business just has not been there for the lunch rush like it used to be, unfortunately, for Eric, at least.
Yeah, so here you can see the concentration of commissaries. So there aren't very many in Manhattan. You can see that concentration on the west side of Manhattan around West 42nd Street. And it does show 3 downtown, but I think none of those are, there are different kinds of commissaries. Hey guys, thanks so much. Yeah, Yeah, thank you. So we'll
Thanks,
see you around. Yeah. Thanks, guys. See ya.
And so they have other employees, Eric, that picks up the truck. So you can see that that Joseph and Nora are done with their shift and
Yep.
probably taking the subway home, like most employees.
Yeah, I was just going to say that you see those 3 commissaries in Lower Manhattan. I don't think any of those are for just regular food carts.
I don't believe though that one on in the East Village is still for food carts. I think it's on
that's right.
Street. I think it's 4th Street.
I think it's the commissary where they actually held the first Vendy Awards.
Oh, I believe that's right. So
back in 2005.
That's right. So yeah, the Vendy Awards have completed their run a few years ago. They ran for 15 years, but they honored food carts and trucks and grew over the years, and we'll actually be visiting one of the winners of the Vendy Awards. But yeah, that very first one, I believe it was at that commissary.
Yeah.
Quite a party.
But there's no more commissaries downtown. So they all have to go to either the west side of Manhattan or over to Brooklyn and Queens.
Yeah.
Here you can see another truck that's set up. So Wall Street has always been a popular spot for food trucks.
Yeah. And we should take a look at a commissary. We actually had a photo, Doug, prior to that one of the Waffles and Dingus commissary, just to kind of see what it looks like. And so that's the law, that these vehicles have to go back to a commissary within a 24-hour period. And that's where they go to store them. They're Department of Health regulated. They have to be cleaned. A lot of the maintenance happens there. So this is a commissary that we used to give tours of, right, Andrew? This was at the factory as well. The Waffles, can you hear us, Andrew?
Yeah, I can. Yeah. So, Waffles and Dingus, they actually used to park on this street here many years ago on Wall Street. So this is their commissary in Gowanus, which historically has had a lot of commissaries in the neighborhood, but Gowanus is undergoing a major neighborhood rezoning. So we'll see what the future of those commissaries looks like as they build more residential density into the neighborhood.
With Waffles and Dingus, they lease their own space. So this is a space dedicated to that business. But
so they have their own. So most commissaries are businesses that lease, they have multiple food cart tenants, so to speak. But in the case of Waffles and Dingus, they're a rare company that has their own commissary, their own commercial kitchen. And it actually services not just New York City, but they produce product in the form of waffle dough for locations across the country. So they just they're going to be opening a location in the American Dream Mall in the Meadowlands.
Right. That's right.
And
they were supposed to do that before
I talked to them the other day. Yeah.
Yeah.
So they have some new locations coming elsewhere in the country. So stay tuned for that.
And someone else who runs a commissary will be heading to his cart at the end of the program. But Adele, who runs a halal cart later on, but he also runs a commissary, and it's a second business for him. So we are down in the financial district, which many people know is the oldest part of New York. And so just a quick little background about the history of food carts. And we've got some photos to share. It would have been common to see the first food vendors. They weren't really carts, whether they were selling hot corn or baked pears or seafood, would have been down in this area, and they would have picked up their goods probably from the harbor or from markets in this area. This was the iconic hot corn, one of the hot corn girls, that there was lots of artwork dedicated to these sort of iconic cries. And one of the other iconic vendors that you might have seen back then and a little bit later were this next photo, which were the oyster and clam carts. You may know that oysters and clams and seafood were very plentiful in New York Harbor once upon a time.
And Brian, I just wanted to add something about that last slide, which is this is one of our favorite kind of discoveries and research that we did over the pandemic. Was we were looking through some archives, and this is really the oldest example of sort of visual documentation of street vendors. This book from 1808 which is all about street hawker cries. So we'll after the program, we'll share a link so you can read the book online. It's a children's book actually, and so it shows a lot of the different foods that were eaten at that time on the street. So even though the earliest documentation we have is from 1808, as we know, people were selling food on the street going back to the very earliest days of New York in the 19th century, or then, excuse me, in the 17th century.
Yeah, and you're walking down where you're walking technically wouldn't have been part of that, would it have? Aren't you on Pearl Street now, which would have been the original shoreline?
So I can show you where I'm at.
And it's a good segue from the oyster carts, because the legend goes is Pearl Street got its name from all of the oyster shells that washed up, or some people say paved the street.
That's right. Yeah. So I'm right here in on the corner of Pearl and Hanover. And just a little tip, if you didn't know this, when you're in Lower Manhattan and you see these streets with black street signs, that means it was part of New Amsterdam. So that's what that symbolizes. And if you see a brown street sign, it means it's a landmark historic district.
And if you see a green street sign, it means you're nowhere special. You're just in
anywhere in And actually, we're a little bit early to our next stop. So I just wanted to step across the street and take you into a little square here. So we're in Hanover Square. And
this is a city park that you're in now, technically, isn't it?
Yeah. And I wanted to come in here to just acknowledge, one of the businesses that we lost as a result of the pandemic. So this was where our friend Jared Domingos had his coffee cart, Periscope Coffee, and he had a parks permit, so he had kind of exclusive domain here in this little pocket park to sell coffee. So that was always a favorite stop on our food cart tours. But Jared's gone on to other things. But
I actually, so Jared used to work for Waffles and Dingus that we mentioned before. So he's a longtime street vendor who branched out and started his own business. And I've known Jared for a long time, even before he started the coffee cart. And I kept running into him and he said, I got to get a permit, which we'll talk about on this program in a little bit. And then I got to find a spot, which we'll also talk about. And both of those things are very difficult. But I ran into him. I was about to give a tour and he was scoping out that particular park and saying, should I get a Parks Department permit? Do you think a coffee cart would work here? I certainly am not taking credit for saying yes, it would. But that was one of his ways in. I mean, that's what vendors have to do, is they have to scout out spots and talk to people. And we'll talk about the city regulations they have to deal with as well to find one of these spots. But yeah, it was a wonderful, wonderful cart. And I know that the neighborhood also, the business people that work there are mourning the loss of that coffee cart.
Yeah, for sure. So we're here at our next stop, Brian. So we're here at Banh Mi Cart, and we're gonna say hello to Harvey and Jack in just a minute. You can see there's a little line forming here. But yeah, so this has also been a long time staple of our food cart tours in the financial district.
That's right. Yeah, and as far as I've been able to determine, this is the only Banh Mi Cart in Manhattan, aside from one that Jack's brother runs as well. But I've not been able to find another one, believe it or not. There may be some in Brooklyn or Queens, but banh mi are Vietnamese sandwiches. And you really see the French influence in Vietnamese cuisine when you get one of these sandwiches, because you've got that crusty baguette bread, but then with more classic Asian flavors inside. And I know that they're, at least before the pandemic, I don't think this would have changed, but they baked their bread fresh at a bakery in Chinatown, in Manhattan's Chinatown, every morning. So I don't know if they moved those operations or.
So why don't we say hello?
Yeah.
Hey Harvey, how's it going? So we're just we have a few people on who are interested in your business, and can you tell us a little bit about the different types of banh mi you serve?
Well, sometimes people like to order like different things, right? So the special is like the classic, pretty much banh mi, and then
and what's on the classic?
Pork, cilantro, sriracha, and pretty much everything.
I'll
And
let you
pickled
talk to your
vegetables, yeah.
customer. Yeah.
Yeah, do you want to show
Um,
the menu here? Is the menu visible?
Yeah. Let's take a look.
So yeah, that pork was usually what we got for the groups, but sometimes there were vegetarians on the tour, and there's a
Mhm.
tofu option there, and
Which is
uh,
delicious.
it really is.
Mhm.
Yeah. Um,
And I'm gonna order one, and so we'll get to take a look at it
yeah,
in
great.
a second. Yeah.
And I believe Jack told me they've been back out for a number of months now. I
Mhm.
think it was March. We should confirm that. Um, they were closed obviously for during the pandemic, and
Mhm.
have just recently come back. But it's really nice to see that their customers have come back as well.
For sure. For sure.
Are there other carts on that street right now, Andrew? That street used to
So
be.
normally this is a really busy street here on Hanover for food carts and trucks, but it's yeah, it's quieter. There's just one other cart down at the end of the street. You can see there called Rice Bowl. There's also some construction across the street, so that obviously
Yeah.
disrupts the ability of carts and trucks. There used to be a lot of trucks that parked. So I see someone ask, where is this located exactly? So we're right on the corner of Hanover and Pearl.
Yes. And
Yeah.
that the scaffolding and other things that are out of the vendor's
Yeah.
control have sometimes displaced
Right.
them. We could talk more about that later now that we've got Harvey available to chat with us. I'd like to know, is Harvey, he's helping some customers still, it looks like. So this is a family-run
Yeah,
business?
yeah, I just put in my order, so we'll chat
Oh, great.
while it's getting ready.
Great. Yeah, I started saying, of course, it was in this neighborhood a little further, I guess, west, that when the city bikes were going in, there was a big concern because the city bikes were being placed overnight where food vendors used to set up on the sidewalk. You remember that, Andrew?
I do.
Yeah. Um, and unfortunately, they were not able to get that changed. I think the Street Vendor Project, who's we mentioned briefly, and we'll talk a little more about. They work to fight for the rights of vendors. They were trying to get those city bikes moved because these vendors work so hard finding their spot and creating a customer base, and all of a sudden they're forced to move, and most of them are not on Twitter and hard to communicate
Yeah,
with their guests
yeah.
what's going on.
So street space and sidewalk space is obviously a precious commodity, and I think the issue wasn't so much that street vendors were opposed to City Bike. It was
No.
that a lot of the stations in this neighborhood were put in without any sort of consultation, and some felt that maybe they were put there with the express purpose of displacing vendors. So we don't like to see that happen, and sometimes that happens more explicitly, where it's not a City Bike station, but just random planters that are put in, by a building owner to displace vendors. So that's not great. And the Street Vendor Project has organized to stop that, where people have tried to do that in various locations. Like it happened in downtown Brooklyn a couple of years ago. It happened down in Bay Ridge several years ago. So it's an ongoing battle. And now, of course, we have the outdoor dining and the seating, the sidewalk and street seating, and we still don't know kind of what the future of that is going to be, because I think most people love the outdoor dining and it's been great, but we still haven't totally figured out all the issues related to trash. And as we saw over the weekend with the torrential rain, all of the drainage as well. I think some of the flooding was exacerbated by some of those outdoor dining structures.
Yes, and these vendors, the vendors have been dealing with that for ages. I mean, they're outdoor dining already. They don't have, of course, seating, but they provide that.
Well, our next stop will.
Oh, that's true. That's true. The next stop, sort of accidentally, or maybe they thought
Okay.
it through when they picked their location, but there is
So
public seating there.
so I got my sandwich here.
Oh, great. And you ordered
Yeah.
the original?
Yeah, I
pork?
ordered the number one. I'll open it up in just a second. But Harvey,
Yeah.
when did you guys come back out on the street?
We came back like 4 days ago, so it's pretty
Oh,
Oh,
wow. That's
no.
amazing.
From the
and how
oh.
has it been since you came back?
really good. We actually like recovered like really well from COVID. Like, it's actually how amazing, how hard everyone worked here. I can't say it more.
That's great. Well, we're
would
really
you ask
pulling for
Harvey
you.
if there's a second cart? Jack had mentioned that his
And do you
brother
guys have
Lee-
a second cart?
Not right now, but we're planning on maybe in the future having another person.
Great. And we just had one question, which is where you get your bread from.
Where I get my what?
Bread.
Bread? We source it from a local bakery, which pretty much bakes it, and then we pretty much buy the bread in bulk, pretty much from the bakery.
Great. Well, thank you guys so much, and best of luck to you. And we'll see you around. Okay. All right. Thanks.
And please,
All
anyone
right.
that's watching, if you have any questions, just drop them in the chat. We will be meeting another vendor shortly, so there's more opportunity to chat with them.
I'm not going to make everyone watch me eat, but I did just want to show you the sandwich before we move on to.
Well, the prices, I don't know if they've changed since before COVID, but it was I think $7?
I'm trying to remember, Brian. Was it $6 or $7 for a number one?
For number one, I don't remember if it was 6 or 7, but I know the sandwiches varied between like 6 and 8, maybe. But
yeah, but you can see it's a giant,
how substantial
sandwich.
It is. Yeah.
Yeah, that's actually one thing. So over the weekend, we were in Jackson Heights, and there were a number of vendors who noted on their carts, on their signage, that their prices have gone up due to the challenges of the pandemic. And hopefully people understand that it's already a very, very inexpensive way to eat. Oh, my sandwich is falling apart a little bit, but here you can see.
Is that the pork sausage there, it looks like?
Yeah. Yeah, so I got the pork sausage sandwich, and you can see that we have cucumber and sriracha, and anyway, it's delicious. I'm excited to eat this after the tour. But okay, so I know we have some more slides and some more things to talk about. So I'm gonna start making our way to our next location.
So yeah, Doug, why don't we go back and show some of the, we just had a banh mi cart, and before that we went to Eric's cart, and Eric is from Mexico, and there's a little bit of a Mexican influence in some of the things. I know he serves tacos at some of his breakfast carts. I'm not sure if he does on that one. Although he also worked for a Greek vendor.
And tamales. They do serve tamales.
They do. Yeah, great. So yeah, and Eric got his start working for a very old Greek business that's not very old, but it's for many of the modern vendors. They've been around since 1973, Uncle Gussie's, and Eric would run the second location on Wall Street. So there's a lot of diversity in terms of the food that you can get. I want to just show just a few other options, Doug, if you push forward here, a little past there. Here we go. So just to show the diversity on the street, we've featured a lot of these vendors in previous programs. You may have seen, but Nuchas Empanadas serves Argentinian empanadas, but also in addition to traditional empanadas, also adds other global flavors. So they've got a Jamaican jerk empanada, and they've got a curry empanada. So that really sort of showcases the melting pot of street food. We also have a photo. Next photo is of another truck that used to park here in the financial district. I believe still does. They're certainly still in business. Thankfully, they've been operating quite a bit in Midtown. And I don't know if they've sort of tested out the waters of not coming down to the financial district, and maybe they'll come back. But this is old traditional Polish cuisine. Serves wonderful kielbasas and pierogies. And then after this cart, we've got a photo of one of our favorite Bengali-owned carts up in Midtown. This is Royal Halal Grill Food. And then finally, one of our old standbys in the financial district. This is Veronica Julian. and her cart, Veronica's Kitchen, which had been coming to the financial district for well over a decade, and had been featured on our tour. She's from Trinidad and served wonderful curry chicken and jerk chicken and doubles and all sorts of wonderful Caribbean dishes. I don't believe Veronica is going to be coming back out to operate. I know that COVID obviously put a strain on a lot of businesses, and even going towards that, she was having a hard time finding staffing. She was doing a lot of it herself, and which is,
I think she's going to a much deserved retirement.
I think so too. Yeah.
Yes. So, Brian, I just wanted to mention that I'm now on Old Slip.
Oh, great. Why don't we?
And I just wanted to show folks
maybe?
this.
Yeah. Why don't we stop the share of the slides and we can see spotlight Andrew here.
And I think this just sort of indicates that things are not all the way back.
Yeah.
Because if we could just spotlight this.
Yeah, there's just 2 food trucks, aren't there?
Yeah, there's one further down. So usually this entire street is just filled with food trucks. It's a popular spot, and one of those, there are a few spots in Manhattan where the vendors will show up, the trucks will show up, at 4 o'clock in the morning just to park and just to serve lunch. And this is one of those spots. But yeah, there's actually just 3 trucks on this 2-block stretch here. So,
and it was very
definitely
popular.
Yep.
This spot, I think, for a number of reasons. First of all, there's no restaurants nearby, so there's no potential competition, and it was obviously near a lot of businesses here, buildings. But also it was the kind of spot where every day it would be sort of a different roster of food trucks. So Old Traditional Polish, for example, would be there on Thursdays or Wednesday. I can't remember the day. But then the next day you'd see grilled cheese and lobster roll trucks, and it would create a sort of rotating list of food options for the people that work and live in this neighborhood. I think Andrew froze for a moment. So, but it looks like he's heading up Front Street here. Oh, there's the other truck, the 3rd truck that is, yeah.
Yep.
So things have not quite gotten back.
So this is.
Yeah, this is a Mexican truck, yes?
This is Zapata. This is actually the first time I've seen this truck, so that's good.
Oh, it looks like they're
serving
birria
tacos. Yeah.
Those stewed beef tacos.
You want to tell people a little bit about what that is?
Yeah, they're stewed beef tacos. I forget what region in Mexico they're from, but it's been very, very difficult to find this specific type of taco up until maybe a few years ago. In New York, and Birrialandia, that was a Vendy Award nominee and operates in Jackson Heights, I believe, but has expanded. So this is a style of taco that's becoming very, very popular around New York. Stewed beef with like tomatoes. Go ahead. I'm sorry if you wanted to.
It's delicious, and Birrialandia has become like a destination in Jackson Heights, and we're a small group today, so I don't think I'm letting the cat out of the bag, but we're working on a food cart tour in the Jackson Heights, Elmhurst area. So hopefully we'll be featuring birria tacos on that. Yeah.
I believe they come out
but
mostly in the evenings. I don't know if their hours have changed, but I know up until at least recently they were like sort of a late night destination. Is that right?
Yeah, and that's the case with a lot of the vendors in Jackson Heights. So you have these sort of different shifts, you could say, for vendors. So the vendors that are here in Manhattan, they're typically operating, they might be breakfast vendor. So they operate earlier, but then the lunch vendors are usually, their prime time is, like 11:30 to 2:30, something like that. Some of the vendors will stay out longer, but
especially
you find out in Queens, though, a lot of for sure.
They're closed by a certain hour. There's no late night or dinner vendors in the financial district, really.
Right. I mean, in Midtown, you do find late night vendors, but not really in the financial district. But the other thing is, you have these sort of, you could almost call them like 3rd shift vendors that are in the places where people who work late at night live. So people who live in places like Jackson Heights and Corona, you have vendors that are serving through the night for people, coming back from or going to work late at night. So it's a totally different economy of vendors that are in those locations than we find in Manhattan.
But something that ties all these vendors together is the regulations that they have to follow. And just briefly, because we've covered this on previous programs, I just want to talk about the permit situation. There's two types of, well, there's a permit and a license you need in order to operate this. Each individual vendor needs a mobile food vendor license, which is about food safety and handling, and you've got to, of course, pass a test. But then the actual vehicle would need a photo. I've got a photo here of it, Doug, the mobile food vendor permit. And up until recently, this has been nearly impossible to obtain because since 1983, there was a cap on the number of permits available in the city, and they were all taken, and it created a sort of a secondary market where vendors were paying astronomical prices to lease one of these permits. But thankfully, we've had a breakthrough after many, many years of trying. Just this past year, Bill 1116 was passed, which will change this program. And we can move to the next slide here, Doug. Here's some details about Bill 1116. So this is going into play starting in July of next year, so a year from now, where more permits will be available. This will help combat the secondary underground market, which was made a lot of the vendors illegal, and unfortunately for no good reason other than the city has made it very difficult for them to obtain these legal permits. But
yeah,
now
I'll add that it's still impossible to get a permit. So none of these new rules have gone into place. It's a good step in the right direction, but you can see they wouldn't increase the cap until July of next year. And there's no guarantee that there would be 400 new permits. It could be 0 because it'll be set by a commission, which does have some street vendor representation, but it's a small minority of that advisory board. So it could be 400, it could be 0. So we don't know
and
how
we
it's
find that
going to work.
information out just shortly before July, I guess, of next year.
We'll see. I mean, I think one important thing is that they need to keep the pressure on because, and I don't know if folks can, yeah, great. So we need to keep the pressure on to make sure that, especially the new administration really follows through on this legislation and puts this new system into place and starts releasing more permits and makes them available. And I say we need to keep the pressure on. At this very moment, that's what the Street Vendor Project is doing. They're actually holding a big rally, on Grand Concourse in the Bronx, which is to really put pressure on the city and the state to release money for excluded workers. Most vendors are not U.S. citizens. Most of them, don't have businesses that are eligible for like the Paycheck Protection program and those types of loans and grants. And so they basically, like you heard, Banh Mi was gone from March until 4 days ago. They didn't have any others, any source of income from their business or any of that assistance. So they're really trying to push for excluded workers to be included in any sort of relief from COVID. That's one part of it. The second thing is, you mentioned having a food handling license.
Yeah.
And since March of last year, no one has been able to take the food handling license exam or the course except online and only in English. So if you don't have access to high-speed internet, and if you don't speak English, you're completely excluded from being able to follow the law and renew your food handling license. So that's another area of contention and some real unfairness. The last thing I'll add is you can see in the second line here, it says a new Office of Street Vendor Enforcement to be created. And so they want to take enforcement away from the NYPD. We're still seeing the NYPD write tickets to street vendors all the time. And so that's something that also needs to be addressed, because that's something the mayor promised would be changed, and doesn't seem that that directive has trickled down through the entire NYPD. So there's still a lot of work to be done. You know, 1116 was a huge achievement and represented, you know, like 7 years of campaigning and organizing, but there's still a long way to go.
And that was just to give a little context, the Street Vendor Project. There's a photo next of Mohammed Atia. The Street Vendor Project is the organization that really helped to get this passed, right, Andrew? And
oh yeah, for sure. And it was, you know, it's not a perfect piece of legislation. It's you know, there are a lot of concessions that had to be made and compromises, but the idea was, you know, how can we help the vendors that need the most help, and you know, start to transform this system that has been basically stagnant for 40 years and doesn't reflect the realities of the city, and really benefits a very small number of entrenched permit holders who basically, you know, just have income for life because they got into the system, you know, 30 years ago.
At the right time, right?
Yeah, at the right time. And that just doesn't seem fair, especially when this is an industry that's really to help people get, you know, it helps people get started, helps people start their own businesses. And we love it when, you know, businesses grow and they move beyond a food cart to maybe a brick and mortar restaurant, or in the case of the halal guys in Midtown,
brick and mortars everywhere.
They have over 75 locations in like 7 different countries. So that's the real success story of a street vendor, and bringing halal food to, you know, a whole new audience. Speaking of which, we're at our last location where we're gonna try some, or I'm gonna try some halal food. I wish I could share it with all of you, but this is a vendor that was on our very first tour of the financial district, and someone who was featured on one of our past virtual programs. So when we send a follow-up, we'll send you the recording so you can hear the interview where we talked to Mohammed, but Mohammed also served as our interpreter for Adel El Nagar, who's from Egypt. So he did the interview in Arabic. And so, yeah, they've been here on this corner. I'll flip my camera around.
And I want to mention that they won this Vendy Award, which I know was a huge boon for their business. When we first met them, they, you know, I hope this doesn't come out wrong. There were lines, but they weren't necessarily like on the map of the food world. They were, you know, they looked like every other halal cart, which they kind of got maybe lost in the mix a little bit. And since the Vendy Awards and time has changed a little bit, they're
definitely on the map. Yeah, for sure. And so we're going to talk to Tito, who has worked on the cart. I don't know how long he's worked. This is Adele right here. So his picture's on the cart. But we'll talk to Tito, and we'll also take a look at what their kitchen looks like on this cart and what they're making today. So, hey, Tito, how's it going?
How are you, my friend?
I don't think you can see me, but hello.
Tito, how long have you worked for Adele's?
I work with Adele's since 7 years. Since 20 years, this car.
So the cart is about 20 years old, and you've been here for 7 years. Yeah. Yeah. So what are you making right now?
I make it chicken, lamb, falafel, but the best falafel with me with vegetarian. More people vegetarian like falafel.
Even non-vegetarians like falafel now. We know.
So we're going to come around the other side and just see you cooking and see what the kitchen looks like. Okay. I'll come around the back. Okay.
And the falafel is certainly, iconic from this cart. We had people on our tours who'd never had falafel, and we'd had many people who had falafel but didn't like it because it wasn't made fresh and properly like what they're doing here at Adele. So they fry the falafel to order and throughout the day.
Yeah, so there you can see they have a fryer here on the cart, and then they have their flat top where they're cooking chicken over here and then lamb over there. And you can see, so this is kind of like, if you think about this as just a shrunk down restaurant, right? This is your line, right? And when it's really busy, there might be 4 guys in this cart and just going down the line with different stations, even though inside here it's about 9 feet wide that they have to stand in there. And then they'll, you can see here.
And they have their ingredients. One of the things they did when they built this cart is they built a like shelf up above, unless this is their other cart. I'm not sure if it's changed. Do they have the ingredients up top? Like,
yeah. And if you could take the spotlight off Brian, Doug, please.
Yeah.
So everybody can see in close.
Here we go.
Great.
So yeah, that shelf up above sort of helped give more space to fit more guys on the cart. There you go. Yep.
And you can also see, if you caught it, one of their other specialties is their eggplant, which is so good. So it's not something you see on the menu. So make sure when you come here, whatever you order, if you order chicken or lamb or falafel, ask for a little bit of eggplant and they'll put it on there. It's delicious.
Hello.
And so they also have another, or at least they did before COVID. I don't know if the other cart had come back, but they would be out in the evenings on certain days in the Lower East Side near the Essex Market.
That's right. So, and this cart will move around. Yeah, I'll ask Tito. So Tito, are you going to any other locations with this cart?
I have another location for Madison with the 83.
80,
With the 83.
83rd and
83,
Madison.
83rd in Madison? Yeah, so, and when are you there?
Sorry?
When are you there? When do you go to 83rd in Madison?
When? Yeah. This almost 12 years.
Oh, but what days are you? What days of the week are you there?
What days?
Yeah, like are you there Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday?
Weekdays. He work weekdays. 5 days. That's all.
Okay.
Oh, so there's a second cart.
There's a second cart that's also on 83rd in Madison, and I know we have some viewers who are in the upper East Side, so you can check them out. Yeah. So now he's making a sandwich, which is what I'm going to order, and get a little pita on there. Yeah.
Andrew, would you? I think that their location also really speaks to the perfect location for a cart. We were mentioning how Jared Domingos had to, was walking around and trying to find a spot. I mean, there's a lot of considerations to take into. So you can see here that they're on a corner street.
So let's take a look. Although it's changed a little bit because they're digging up the street.
I see that. That's where Adele used to park, actually.
Right. So this was their spot right here. So we're right on the corner of Front and Maiden Lane, and we're in front of the Continental Center right here, which is when we restart our tours. This is probably be our starting location. For a long time, this lobby was actually closed. After Hurricane Sandy, this whole area was flooded. Shouldn't come as a mystery that we're 1 block from Water Street. And so during Sandy, the water reached Water Street, the former shoreline of Manhattan. So this was closed for a long time. So we moved locations, and then
and you can imagine that was another thing that sort of hampered is that the right word? That made it difficult for the vendors.
Yeah.
Didn't, the recovery maybe didn't last as long as the COVID situation, but all the business people that worked here were gone during Sandy. They were displaced to other neighborhoods. So the business.
Yeah, I mean, like if we go further down 55 Water Street, which is one of the biggest office buildings in the United States, that was closed for like over a year, like no tenants at all after Sandy. So yeah, it's been a rough decade for the office districts in Manhattan. And then go a decade before that, and you had 9/11, and many of these vendors were here during 9/11 as well. Yeah. But so what makes this location ideal is you're proximity to a big office building, and it has both seating out front as well as indoor seating and restrooms as well, which is important for both the customers as well as the vendors. So when you think about, you know, you may have food that's as good as or better than any restaurant, but your cart is never going to have a bathroom or seating. So you got to find ways to replace that so you can compete with other lunch offerings in the neighborhood.
And I wanted to point out, before COVID, I don't know if it's changed, but there was a taxi stand, a designated taxi stand right behind.
Yeah,
where
so
they've
taken this.
Obviously,
they've taken
this
the sign.
is no longer.
Yeah, they've taken the sign down, or it's covered up. So yeah, but this is normally a taxi stand, and that's actually how halal food in New York got started. Was, you know, vendors, especially in Midtown, started serving halal food to serve all of the Muslim cab drivers, and then it just kind of grew from there. This started sort of in the early 90s, although we know a halal vendor who started as early as 1987. But yeah, that was their early customer base. And then that food just sort of, you know, diffused throughout the population. And now everybody in New York loves it.
Yeah,
so we can take a look at the menu.
I explained to visitors who are maybe coming expecting to get hot dogs and pretzels on our tour that really the modern street food that most New Yorkers day in and day out are sort of expecting. The more iconic modern food is the halal food, the street meat, chicken or lamb over rice. So we have just a few more minutes here, Andrew. Maybe 4 or 5 more minutes.
Okay, great. So I'm gonna put in my order. So hopefully we can take a look at the finished product before we go.
Yes, great. Yeah, and if there are any questions, please do drop them in. This is just a sample of the vendors that we have worked with and will continue to work with in the Financial District. And obviously Midtown is a whole different neighborhood, so there's different vendors up there as well. Yeah, and also, you know, over the years, there was a construction site across the street. That hotel that's there now took quite a while to build, so you would often see construction workers in line for this wonderful cart getting lunch. You know, it's such a wonderful, cheap option, affordable option for people that need a quick meal, which in the Financial District, where whether you're working, you usually have a very quick lunch break, and you want something affordable.
That's one thing, Brian, talking to a lot of the vendors, it seems that construction has come back a little bit quicker than office workers. And so construction workers have become a much larger sort of part of their business than in the past. But we should talk a little bit about, Brian, because this is something that you noted when you were in the neighborhood a couple of weeks ago, which is that, you know, a lot of businesses and building owners are obviously having trouble. Oh, here's my sandwich coming up. Yeah, a little bit of red sauce. Yeah, their hot sauce is delicious.
Yeah, what I noticed the other day was there was a series of
and a little
trucks.
Eggplant.
I guess I'll wait. I don't want to distract from this show.
Oh
here.
yeah, some tahini too. Yeah.
Allison asked, "What hours is Adele's there?" I know in the old days. Well, why don't we ask Tito?
Yeah. What are your hours? When do you close?
Almost 4 o'clock.
So you're open like 11 to 4? You're open 11 to 4 or 12 to 4?
Yeah.
And the same is true at Madison?
For my staff, almost 10 o'clock. I cooking for my food. I prepare for my food. When 12 o'clock coming, I am ready for lunchtime. But now, you know, this time for coronavirus, little bit business slow. Like this, you show this lunchtime so slow now. Yeah. But I watch September or October, this good business.
Yeah. Inshallah.
Inshallah.
Yeah. Inshallah.
Yeah. You eat now?
I'm gonna take it with me.
Oh, you take it?
Yeah. Yeah. So as we were saying, a lot of businesses and building owners have started bringing in street vendors as an enticement to get people to come back to the office.
Yeah, in Battery Park, in front of, I think it was the Goldman Sachs building, I noticed maybe 8 food trucks, which wasn't uncommon
Thank
to
you so much.
see
I'll be back in 1 second.
before COVID. But I spoke with the security guard to ask how often they were there, and evidently they were brought in by the, not in, but brought to the street by the building, and the employees of the building got free meals. It was open to the public. I could have purchased lunch, but people, I guess they had to show ID. It was, I guess, in place of a cafeteria. And maybe it was also, I didn't ask in details, but maybe it was, the safer idea of eating outdoors during COVID. So eating in a cafeteria, obviously not quite as safe. So I don't know, but it was neat to see.
Yeah, so it'd be nice to give that opportunity to more vendors, and give them that business, because it is such a great amenity. And
For
as
both,
we know,
and the vendors obviously hired by the company
Right.
to be there, so they don't have to worry about the lack of foot traffic or the weather or whatever. They've got a set time and place and income for the day.
Yeah, and we know that street vendors are essential workers. Street vendors have played such an important role in feeding communities, because a lot of vendors, while they weren't here in Manhattan, many of them just set up and fed their communities where they live in Brooklyn and Queens and the Bronx. And yeah, and as we know, as we've mentioned before, vendors worked with the Street Vendor Project to bring meals to people in need. And it's a lot better than a lot of the food you might get from Meals on Wheels. Not to knock them, but I'm just saying it's a pretty nice meal. And the Street Vendor Project worked with charitable organizations and with elected officials to provide meals to people, and also provide income to the vendors for making those meals. So they've been a really, really important part of just providing food assistance to people in need. And that's why they should be part of the recovery as well.
Without a doubt. So yes, well, if there's any last questions, please drop them in. But thank you so much for joining us. This is very exciting preview for our upcoming in-person tours. Andrew, thanks so much for eating and walking around. Thanks for taking one for the team by eating all this food.
Well, I haven't eaten any of it yet.
Well, I know you're about to feast down, and we know there's public seating right there, so I'm sure you'll be able to make yourself comfortable. But thank you all so much for joining us. Again, all of our upcoming programs and tours are on our website, turnstyletours.com. So please check those out, and come down to the Financial District in Midtown, whether it's on one of our in-person tours or just to support these Street Vendor Project, these small business owners, these essential workers, and get some delicious food, because it's a big part of the fabric of New York.
This was really fun, Brian, and it was such a pleasure for me to talk to some of the.
I think you're standing in a spot where the service is going in and out. I'm guessing that you're saying you enjoy this.
Oh, no worries.
Connecting with the vendors.
Sorry.
Again. No, it's okay.
Yeah. Thank you so much, everybody, and thank you, Brian. This is a really fun conversation, and we want to keep supporting the vendors, and the proceeds from today's program will go to support the Street Vendor Project. And join us next week when, Brian, you're going to be talking to Max Schiano about his photography book.
Which I just quick, there it is. So a little preview for next Thursday.
Yeah.
So
and that'll also go to support SVP.
Yep, indeed it will. So thanks again. Yes, everyone says they're hungry. Go enjoy lunch, and we'll see you all soon. Thanks so much, guys. Take care.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.